He worked alone with a torch for years, smiled for the cameras, and made dream cars out of junk. But something much darker was revving in the background, masked by the noise of the engines and the flash of metal. The 53-year-old Chad Hiltz, better known as Bad Chad, has finally said what fans have been talking about for years. It's not about money, fame, or even the stress of being center of attention. This is more personal and goes deeper. Fans are both sad and angry about it. He said the words that no one expected when he was being completely honest. "I have to keep this from you. But why and what should you hide?" What could drive a man who is so brave and honest to hide something for so long? We no longer believe what we thought we knew after learning the truth. What does Bad Chad do? In the past, he was just Chad Hiltz from the small town of Canning, Nova Scotia. People didn't know him as Bad Chad, just a kid with big dreams and just enough money to get by. No fancy tools or a silver spoon. When it came to grit, vision, and a nearly obsessive drive to make something out of nothing, he more than made up for his lack of money. His childhood wasn't good. Chad had a rough childhood and dropped out of high school. He seemed bound for a quiet, hard-working life away from fame. There was a mechanical genius hiding in that small-town rebel, though. He could make jaw-dropping custom cars out of scrap metal and broken parts. His builds were rough, creative, and very different from what most builders would use. He often put them together with things that most builders wouldn't even touch. That's the thing that made him unique. When Bad Chad Customs premiered on Discovery Channel, it was Chad's big break. It wasn't about high-end builds or shiny sheds with lots of money. It was a whole different thing. The show took place in Chad's small garage in Nova Scotia, Hiltz Auto Co., and followed him and his close-knit team, which included his partner, Jolene McIntyre, as they took on big jobs on very little money. Not only were the creative cars what drew people in, but Chad himself was a fascinating force of chaos. Hiltz said that the first season of the Discovery Channel show, Bad Chad Customs, ran around the world in 2019 and was watched by millions of people. In fact, we had no choice but to use social media after COVID pushed back the filming of Season 3. Fans thought he was the real deal. He didn't care about the rules of the business or the standards of purists. He would weld pieces of airplane metal together to make wings out of license plates. He didn't try to be anything he wasn't, and he was tough and determined. His strange sense of style, blunt honesty, and never-ending energy made him famous right away. He wasn't just making cars, though. He was also making a story. The story of the artist who comes from nowhere. A man who didn't fit the mold, didn't live by the rules, and broke standards. That myth inspired a lot of people around the world, but it also set a standard that was hard to reach. It became a sign of bold creativity in Chad, but that cost a lot. Behind the scenes, the pressures of always coming up with new ideas, making TV shows, and having a growing fan base started to get to him. While many reality stars faded into anonymity, Chad stayed out in the open and open to scrutiny. There was close attention on every post, project, and choice, and things started to change slowly. Online rumors started to spread. Was he getting tired? Was all the stress getting to him? Some fans saw changes in the way he acted. He was still very smart, but he seemed less focused and closer. The spark was still there, but it would sometimes go out. Some people didn't like it too. There were just as many devoted fans who praised his creativity as there were who doubted his skill. Keyboard pros took his builds apart. People on online sites made fun of his methods. Some people said he was careless. Some said he was just a TV mechanic. More of a showman than an artist. Even so, Chad kept going, building, and smiling up until now. It turned out that he had been hiding something for years behind the curtain. When he finally said, "I have to hide this," the story fell apart completely. Fans of the man thought they knew him. He was real, but he was hurt. And this secret was something that not even Chad could figure out. How to build a story. The image versus the man. When Chad Hiltz became known as Bad Chad, something strange happened. He didn't just become famous in the world of custom cars. He became a myth, a symbol, and a live example of being rebellious, tough, and proud to be yourself. It wasn't made in a studio in Hollywood. PR people or image experts didn't push it. It just happened on its own. One roof cut, one weld in the garden, and one stubborn choice at a time. Fans were amazed as Chad turned real trash into works of art, not just cars, but also moving expressions of himself. People liked that he didn't follow the rules because he didn't think they were important. He was the one who wouldn't fit in. He didn't wear shop outfits. Instead, he wore ragged t-shirts. If he had to, he used a cooking spoon to spray paint. With a hammer and his desire, he could shape rusted metal again. Some thought it looked like a mess. Some people saw it as freedom. Chad Hiltz did more than just work on cars. He was making up a story, and the story was captivating. Amidst a sea of over-the-top TV shows and fake drama, Bad Chad Customs provided something real, or at least something that seemed real. The garage in a small town, the small crew, and the impossible schedules. The conflict between Chad's crazy ideas and the money he has available. Everything worked like magic. People who like cars now look up to him like a hero. It's very honest and real. And I think that gives us an edge over other YouTube channels, Jolene McIntyre said. They don't show the real deal, but we do. We show the whole process. The trouble with folk heroes is this. They shouldn't change, say people. There were more and more stories about Chad as his fame grew. Fans started to picture their own ideals in him. The self-made man, the genius from the middle class, or the outsider who beat the odds without giving up. He became a success story for everyone, and for many, that was a great thing. But it turned into a cage, too. For Chad to live up to the story, he had to change into someone else. Always coming up with new ideas, being brave and on. No matter what, he couldn't have a bad day, mess up, or show fear or doubt. The person who played Bad Chad was huge, and the person who played him had to keep up with him no matter what. It began quietly. A missed post here, and a movie that's not as long as usual there. Fans would ask Chad if something was wrong, and he would joke or shrug it off. But the cracks showed up over time. There was more and more stress. There was always work to do. And the anticipation grew with each new show or car reveal. There were no longer people who watched just for fun. They watched to judge him, to test him, and to attack him. That's when the bad side of fandom showed up. For every message of praise, there was one full of ridicule, doubt, or outright hatred. Some people said he was dishonest. Others said that the way he did things put people in danger. Some even questioned his intelligence, his morals, and even his bond with Jolene. It went from being criticism to something personal. But Chad didn't break even then. He stepped up. His projects got tougher, his movies got longer, and he added more detail, flair, and edge. Not only did he want to show the haters they were wrong, he was trying to live up to the story that people had made up about him. A story that didn't let for weakness. The hero who wouldn't say, "I'm not okay." Behind the camera, the stress was getting too much to handle. Chad was mentally, physically, and emotionally worn out, but the show had to go on. He learned how to separate things, how to smile through worry, and how to laugh while quietly falling apart. What would happen if he was honest? What would Chad's fans say if they saw the real, Bad Chad, the one who worried, who felt overwhelmed, and who sometimes wanted to give up? He thought he already knew the answer. They would be let down. They would turn against him. They would no longer believe the story. He hid it, though. During filming, he hid the sleepless nights, The worry that he would let down fans, the guilt of not replying to all of their messages, the stress and the anger that came from getting hate mail like insults, cruel emails, and even threats. They came from strangers who just didn't get it, and they came from people who said they were fans before. Bad Chad didn't talk about it, though, so no one saw it. He put up a wall between himself and the rest of the world instead. A wall made of self-assurance, snark, and hard work that never stops. He thought he could make it through as long as the builds kept coming and the tale didn't change. But the man was breaking down on the inside. The two-life, the story and the man, could no longer go on. He could no longer act like everything was okay. He couldn't say yes to the picture all the time and no to his own peace of mind. And it got too much in the end. Something changed at 53. It could have been age. It could have been burnout. It might have finally reached a point where the pain of lying was greater than the fear of telling the truth. No matter what the reason was, Chad stopped hiding. There are cracks starting to show. Chad was able to keep up the illusion for a while. The builds got crazier, the cars got more complicated, and the movies got more stylized. The power? Still electric. But something had changed, and fans with sharp eyes could see it. The first signs were not very clear. More angry Chad was seen in some episodes of Bad Chad Customs. He'd lose his temper in the middle of a job. They looked heavier in his eyes. The light-hearted banter he used to have with his partner Jolene was still there, but it didn't happen as often. His social media posts stopped coming at regular times. Also, when he did post something, the captions often gave hints of mental weariness, burnout, or struggle. Fans at first just thought it was one of those ups and downs. Sure, every artist gets tired at some point, but as time went on, worry turned into guesswork. Was Chad all right? Was all the stress of running a business, a show, and staying current finally getting to him? After that, there was backlash. People on online forums, especially Reddit and groups for custom car builders, started criticizing everything about him, from the way he welded to the way he ran his business. Some said his builds were dangerous. Others made fun of the fact that he didn't have any official training. One person wrote that Bad Chad is more like an artist than a mechanic. It looks cool, but I wouldn't drive it. Not just harsh reviewers stopped at his work. They made it about them. They asked him about his pride, his behavior, and his connection. Drama was said to be going on behind the scenes. Anonymous accounts left vague comments about what really happens at Hiltz Auto Co. When Jolene stopped posting as much on Instagram, some people even thought she was having a breakup, a breakdown, or both. Chad never said anything about the reports. That was never his style. But his smile looked fake in some vids. His eyes moved around more, seeing if there is something outside the frame. More and more, it was hard to hide the truth. In secret, Chad was sinking. It wasn't just a few mean emails, it was a steady flow of hate mail. In some letters, people said he was betraying them. Others said bad things about him, his body, and his life. Some even had threats hidden inside them. At first, he tried not to notice them. After that, he ran away. Sometimes it was even Jolene, and other times it was himself. There is a small pile of pain growing in a drawer. It didn't bother him, he told himself. He was stronger than this, and could beat the hate. He didn't want to accept it, but it did matter to him. And the longer he held it in, the worse it got for everyone else. His joy, his imagination, his focus, and his patience, what he loved most. The building was filled with worry and stress. It was no longer just a project to work on every car. As a defense, they tried very hard to show the trolls they were wrong and keep the story alive. But a man can only wear a mask for so long. Soon, he wouldn't just have cracks, he would break. When he finally did, fans were shocked by both what he said and how long he had kept it a secret. What an admission! When he finally admitted it at age 53. There was no build-up, fanfare, or staged moment. It was just a quiet movie that was put online late one night. Chad Hiltz was in his garage by himself and finally ready to say what he had been putting off for years. There should be no tank tops, wild moves, or showmanship. He looked old and tired, like the weight of something that had been hidden for a long time had finally worn him down. Chad showed a side of himself that not many people had seen before in this raw moment. Open, honest, and emotionally tired. He finally said he had been struggling in secret for decades after years of moving forward with grit and bravado. What caused it? A steady flow of hate mail, criticism, and personal threats that had built up over a few years. It began with a few mean emails sent here and there after a new episode played. At first, he didn't think much of it, thinking it was part of the deal. But as time went on, the volume went up and the tone got coarser. At first, people were critical of his methods or car designs. Over time, these comments evolved into very personal and often mean messages that attacked not only his work, but also his personality, intelligence, and even his personal life. As the bad mood got worse, Chad came up with a routine. He would print or write down the worst texts and save them, and put them in a drawer in his workplace and locked the door. Over time, that box came to represent his private space, where he kept the bad things he didn't want anyone else to see. Not his team, not his friends, not even Jolene. He had to keep up the public image of Bad Chad as the brave rebel who never let anything bother him. This meant he couldn't be honest about how much it hurt. He thought that being honest would be seen as weak. It was an insult to the figure that fans had grown to like. He played the part. The only things he did were smile and build. Everything else was hidden behind the camera. But the mental damage didn't go away just because he wouldn't admit it. The stress got into the way he was writing. His face began to show that he was tired. He used to enjoy turning rust into art, but over time, a crushing sense of duty took its place. He was no longer just making cars. He was making armor to protect himself from what people were saying about him. Being silent for so long hurt me too much to handle. So, Chad took off the mask in this rare and sad video. It wasn't over the top. He just told it like it was. He had to take in all the bad things that happened to him for years. He decided to suffer in silence because he thought upholding the myth that people wanted him to uphold was more important than his own mental health. What Chad said went beyond his own problems. It brought up a bigger problem: the weight that famous people, especially those who are praised for being tough, carry without anyone seeing it. People like Chad are supposed to be unbreakable in a culture where being weak is often seen as failing. If they're not with someone, they suffer alone. Chad's choice to finally speak out didn't just break the bad guy myth. Everyone in the room had to rethink what they had expected from him in the first place. The video didn't have a dramatic ending or an answer. It just showed a man deciding to come out of hiding, even though it meant letting down people who thought he would be safe. At that very moment, the man behind the icon came into full view. He wasn't perfect or unbeatable. He was just real. He got his voice back by moving from TV to YouTube. After the first episode of Bad Chad Customs on Discovery Channel, Chad Hiltz quickly went from being Nova Scotia's scrappy loser to a well-known figure in the world of custom cars. The idea behind the show was different. A genius from a small town who has never gone to school but makes crazy creative cars out of scrap metal and garbage leftovers. There are no big budgets or flashy sponsors. Just raw ability and a never-ending drive. People were hooked. Chad's unique voice, mad scientist creativity, and rebellious approach to making cars were a nice change from the overly polished, formulaic auto shows that were already on TV. It wasn't always the case that the builds were pretty, but they had soul. Chad did the same thing. People liked him not because he was great, but because he was real. Bad Chad traditions quickly gained a strong following, showing in many countries and becoming one of Discovery's most popular reality shows. But something else was going on behind the rising fame. As the show grew, so did the needs for production. It went from being an unplanned, hands-on, let's build it and see what happens kind of show to one that was more planned, polished, and packed. The producers wanted stories. They wanted tight due dates. They wanted a show. Not just from the cars, but also from Chad. There was less of the grit that made the show interesting in the first place. For better shots, scenes were done more than once. Talks were taped again so the sound would be clearer. What made Chad unique was his freedom, but it began to shrink. The Bad Chad brand was going through the roof, but the man behind it was quietly getting tired. In the middle of all this media chaos, Chad turned his attention to YouTube, a smaller screen that he could actually control. He had tried posting behind-the-scenes videos, time-lapses of builds, and news about his shop on the site before. He could now really do something else instead of being in the spotlight. It was a way to get back to something more personal, raw, and him. YouTube, unlike TV, didn't need any permissions, approvals, or editing notes from creators in another country. It was possible for Chad to record a video in the morning, post it that afternoon, and talk to his viewers directly, without any filters or agents. McIntyre said it was like the time of everything was just right, and it touched people. His number of subscribers kept going up, even though TV seasons were being pushed back or stopped. Lots of people switched from cable to his channel because they wanted to see Bad Chad as more of a real person than a TV figure. The comments showed that. Not as much criticism, but more relationship. No longer were people just looking out for cars. They had their eyes on him. YouTube gave Chad a place to be open and honest. There was no need for big music or camera angles for him to get his point across. He could talk about stress, burnout, and what it means to build when the cameras are off and the bills are due.